The following podcast is a Dear Media production.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Real Stuff podcast and welcome to an episode of our new sub-series that we're calling Don't Hang Up, where I pick up the phone and I call people in my real life and I urge them, please do not hang up while I ask them deeply personal questions and make them talk about things that might make them uncomfortable. My thought was that there are a lot of people out there who do not want to listen to an hour-long podcast interview, but you might have a little entry into the podcast space if it was a short form, digestible conversation. And I love the fact that I'm calling people in my real personal life because this is the real stuff. And I want to give you guys a voyeuristic glimpse inside some of these conversations. So in today's episode, we are going to be calling my dad, and I want to talk to him about his choice to wait 16 years before he had children after him and my mom got married. It was a very different journey from what I went through with my husband, and he's now in his mid-70s and is a grandfather. And so I want to talk to him just about how he feels after having waited so long and what he regrets or doesn't regret about that decision. So let's go with Jimmy Fink.
Hello.
Hi, Dad.
What's up?
Thanks for picking up my call after one ring. I know
You want to call let it ring a few more times?
No, we're good.
Okay.
I don't know if you expected to dive deep into a conversation today, but I wanted to chat with you a little bit about how you chose to wait so long after you and Mom got married before you chose to have kids.
Okay, sure.
So
I don't know if it was that much of a conscious decision to wait, but sort of just turned out that way. I guess I could explain why.
You were born in 1949. It's almost like you're from the Stone Age or something.
Well, we did have telephones and television and electricity and cars.
That's true.
So it's not really that ancient, but yeah. So I'm 76 years old.
And you waited until 1989 before you had Robbie, your first son.
Yes, and I was married in 1973.
So that means you waited 16 years after getting married before you guys tried for kids.
That is correct. Now, as I said earlier, or if you weren't recording me earlier, I don't know if it was really so much of a conscious decision, but it pretty much turned out that way, and I guess there are reasons why.
My understanding is that as time goes on, in the history of the world, people are now having kids later and later. So back in the 80s, I feel like people were actually having kids on the earlier side, and it wasn't that abnormal for someone to have kids in their early 20s. So for you to wait until you were, I guess, turning 41 seems like it's a long gap. So what exactly was your thought process behind waiting because you were married and settled down and already lived in a house?
Well, we didn't live in a house right away. When we first got married, we first lived in a one-bedroom condo in Rockland County in a little village called Valley Cottage. And we lived there for 3 years, from 1973 to 1976. And then we decided to buy a house. Well, that's when we could afford to buy a house 3 years later in 1976. And even though we bought a house that had more bedrooms, we still did. Sorry, hold on. I'm talking to Lucie. Okay? She's recording me. Okay. Sorry we were interrupted.
Hi, Mom.
She's just telling me that she's going to do some exercise. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Good for her.
Yeah. She walks. She goes into the stairwell of the building and walks up like 10 flights.
Oh, wow. That's good. I'm proud of her.
Yeah. She's been doing it for a while, so it's good. But where was I?
You were saying you bought the house in 1976.
We bought the house in 1976, and even though it had more rooms, it wasn't a one-bedroom house, obviously. We had 3 bedrooms, and still we didn't have kids for another 13 years. And actually, we didn't have kids in that house. We lived in that house for 12 years with no kids. Big house. We had 2 dogs. We always had 2 dogs. And, I had 2 jobs. I was working at the bakery and also on the radio. And we were sort of collecting money and doing a lot of traveling, doing a lot of late night club activity. And we also had an apartment in New York City for some of that time because we did this, what I called club activity. We went to Studio 54 all the time. And we went to Studio 54, and you didn't go there till like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And you finished your fun there at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So we decided, we better have an apartment in New York City to crash instead of coming all the way back up to Westchester at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then having me to go back to do the morning show on the radio at 6 o'clock in the morning. So, we, what you call sowed our wild oats. We partied a lot. We traveled a lot. And didn't settle down to have kids until we bought our second house. We sold the first house in 1988 and moved into our house, the house that you were born in 1988. And a year later, we had our first child. It's interesting because the people who lived in the house before us, when they first moved in, they didn't have any kids, and they were struggling to have kids. And as soon as they moved into that house, as a matter of fact, they couldn't have any kids, so they adopted. And then as soon as they moved into that house, they started having kids. So when we bought the house from them, they warned us. They said, "You better watch it because this is a fertile house." They had twins. And a year after we lived there, we had a kid. And then a couple of years later, we had twins. So they were right. It was a fertile house.
This isn't really what the topic of the call was about, but we really rarely talk about the fact that you guys owned that New York City apartment. What was it, on Central Park West?
It was on 83rd and Central Park West. We actually bought the apartment from a famous photographer. And go on.
Do you deeply regret selling that apartment?
It was a studio apartment. It was basically like a crash pad for us. I mean, Mommy's, a pretty good designer, and so it really looked quite elegant. It was really nice. We mirrored a whole wall. We had a couch that turned into a king-size bed. And but it was a studio apartment, so it wasn't like a 1-bedroom. It wasn't really big, and no, we were ready to leave it.
So, at what point, when you are almost 41, or I guess you were around 40 when Mom got pregnant?
Yeah.
So, at what point in those years did you guys decide, I think we should actually try? And was the decision based on the fact that Mom was 38 and time was ticking?
I don't know if we actually decided or it sort of just happened. Maybe, it was a long time ago, so I don't know. We stopped using birth control or it just sort of happened. And I guess we decided, we decided we better do it if we're going to do it. And we pretty much made a conscious decision not to do it for several years because we were just partying a lot and traveling a lot, and kids weren't on the radar for us. And a few of our friends had kids. I guess Julie, you know who Julie is.
Yeah.
She was a neighbor of ours in our first house. She had kids. and also your friend Hannah, her parents, they were our backdoor neighbors for a while. They had kids in our first house, and those were the older kids that were born before you were born, before you guys were born.
Did you grow up knowing that you wanted to have kids?
Um, I think there was a time when I didn't really think about it that much, but I think there was a time that mommy was not ready to have kids. I mean, let's remember when we first got married, mommy was only 21 years old. And it wasn't the time, like you look at you. How old were you when you had your first kid?
I was 29.
Okay, so mommy was very young. She was 21 years old, right out of college. Actually, she was still going to school to get her master's. So it wasn't like we were jumping into marriage so that we could have kids right away, because mommy was still going to school, getting her master's in New York City. I was working on the radio and also working at the bakery. And I think we pretty much made a conscious decision to make sure we had our finances in order and to have a house that was right for us to raise kids and lived in a neighborhood that was right for us to raise kids before we decided to have kids. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Did you, I guess, think at all about how having kids later would mean that you would be on the older end of parents? Because I do think my whole upbringing, you guys were definitely, on average, maybe 10 years older than a lot of our friends' parents. And now I think the contrast is more apparent because now you're grandparents to my kids. And, just for example, Michael's parents, my in-laws, at least Michael's mom, she's turning 60 this year. So
right.
She's like 15 years younger than you. And just as far as being a grandparent goes, are you noticing that now that, you being on the older side, is that having drawbacks for you, or are you happy about that?
Yes, it does have drawbacks for me. I didn't sort of think about it when I was younger and just raising you guys, because there were also other people who are, I guess maybe most of our friends are 8 to 10 years younger than us. But it kind of is a little disconcerting now because, I'm thinking about, like, for example, Milo's 3 years old. So when he's 13 years old, I'm going to be 86. That's pretty old. And so I'm pretty much resigned that I probably am not going to be around when he gets married, or when Coco's a teenager. I don't know if, how active I'll be. We were just talking the other day, your brother lives, in New Jersey. It's about an hour car ride away, and don't know if, like, when I'm 80, my 80s, I'll be able to still drive for an hour just to go see my granddaughter and my son. So yeah, there are a lot of drawbacks to that at this point. But we had fun for 16 years. Let's not forget that part either. As far as not to be selfish in any kind of a way, but we thought about ourselves and not so much didn't think about our kids until we had them. I never sort of really thought about those kind of things when you were going to school and that I was older, because I didn't think I was getting closer and closer to death, so to speak. But now, like, I'm 76 years old. I just heard about somebody who died, and they were 82, so that's only 6 years older than me. So, I hope I live a long time. I mean, your grandmother, mommy's mom, she lived into her 90s. If I live into my 90s, that'd be great because that'll be 14 years from now. Maybe I will see Milo graduate high school. But I don't know. And that, that kind of makes me a little sad.
I think it's great too. The front end of it, I admire greatly because I think I always thought it was really awesome that you and mom had these 16 years together and all the adventures you went on. And, I would find as a kid telling people that I was saying it with pride. Like, my parents were married all this time and they came home and told us stories, or not came home, but from the moment we were born, they were telling us stories about their travels to Egypt and Greece and being all over the world and all the funny stories that we know. And of course, the Studio 54 times and being on the radio and the businesses. And I feel like that was a definite positive side. And as far as life goes, it's kind of a trade-off. Either you're going to have all this time. I mean, if you choose to have kids, you're either going to have all this time for yourself and have kids late. And then depending on how long you live, maybe not get as many active years with them or with your grandkids. Or you have not a lot of time for yourself and you have kids super young, and then you're a super young grandparent and you're maybe involved for more, but you just didn't get as much time for yourself. And I don't think there's one is better than the other, but I hope you get the best of both. I hope you get to have what you had, and I hope you live long.
Yeah. And so do I. And let's also remember that our best friend, your Uncle Donald, didn't have any kids. So we were, and he was our contemporary, the same age as us. So it wasn't like our best friend, had these kids and was enjoying having a family and all that stuff. He didn't have any kids. So we were in a situation where it wasn't like our best friend had kids and we were sort of being pressured into having kids or something like that. Because, we'd had friends who had kids, but we weren't really that close to them the way we were with your Uncle Donald.
Yes. And maybe I'll call you soon for another episode of Don't Hang Up to dive into the late and great Uncle Donald.
Okay.
All right. Well,
sure.
Thanks for not hanging up. This was lovely. I love talking about this, and cheers to hoping that you live until 95 or 100 in good health.
That'd be great. And I could go to Milo's wedding.
Yes. I will save a seat for you at Milo's wedding.
That'll be good. I'll start writing my speech now.
All right. Great. Love you.
Okay. See you later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Real Stuff podcast. If you're liking the show, please head over to Apple or Spotify and leave us a written review. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment down below and join in the conversation. And if you're feeling called to be a guest on the show, visit luciefink.com/apply and tell us your story. Thank you so much, as always, for sharing your time and attention with us, and we will see you next time on the Real Stuff podcast.
Please note that this episode may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products and services. Individuals on the show may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to in this episode.